Thank you everyone for joining us today. So this is the time we'll get started. So I hope everyone can see the screen and hear me well. Okay, yeah. My name is Praveen Anil. I work for Spectra Systems and I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. So I have been working with Azure technologies for over 5 years now. So yeah, with this pandemic, we all understood that hybrid workplace is the future of work. So in today's webinar, we are going to learn like how your organization can migrate to a hybrid workplace using Azure Virtual Desktop. So stay tuned till the end, and I can assure you that you will leave the session with a lot of knowledge because we have an expert speaker who will be delivering the webinar. So with that, we will get started. A warm welcome again to everyone who joined here. So first thing is, so about us. So why we are doing this webinar? So I am part of Spectra Systems. So and we are a cloud solutions company which was founded in 2016. So we have various products. CloudLabs. CloudLabs. So CloudLabs is one of our products that is sponsoring this particular webinar for everyone. So along with CloudLabs, like we have many products: CSP Control Center, SaaSify, Cloud Events. So all these products basically are designed and built for cloud providers, ISVs, and partners. So essentially, like all the products operate on top of cloud platforms and provide additional value-add services. So that's what we do. And moving on to the next slide. So yeah, so as we discussed, CloudLabs is our product. So CloudLabs is a hands-on lab platform, so through which we can provision lab environments and also provide practices. So CloudLabs helps organizations, institutions, trainers in delivering training that are cost-effective, and also helps in delivering it at any scale, whether it is big or small. Like so far, CloudLabs has provisioned around 1 million labs worldwide, and we continue to do so, enabling learning across the world. So it's used by Microsoft themselves for a lot of things. So along with Microsoft, we work with Checkpoint, Cloudera, Databricks, Red Hat, Sophos, and various other organizations, and we support them 24/7. So yeah, that was all about Spectra and what we do. And with that, like I hand it over to Sushant, so the speaker for the day. So he is a Microsoft certified trainer and a cloud solutions architect. So in the community, he's a well-known personality. He has his own YouTube channel. So I'll leave it up to him to tell him about himself. So over to you, Sushant. So have a great session, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Praveen. Hi, warm welcome, everyone. Like Praveen was mentioning, my name is Sushant Sutish. I'm a cloud solutions architect and a Microsoft certified trainer. I do a part-time YouTube as well, where I share my knowledge on related to Azure and Microsoft 365 on those channels. I am certified on Microsoft 365 and Azure on an expert level. All right, so today we are going to talk about Azure Virtual Desktop. So let's look at the high level agenda here. So we have very few topics, but we have breaking down in such a nice format. So it is easier for you to grab this knowledge. First, we will kick off with helping you understand what is Azure Virtual Desktop and what are the benefits of this technology. Then we will move on to a quick demo on how Azure Virtual Desktop look like. I will make sure to help you understand how you can configure this using your Azure portal as well. Then we will go and see about the deployment options for Azure Virtual Desktop. What are the things you need to consider while deploying Azure Virtual Desktop? What do you need to know about compute, storage, and other components? The fourth topic is around management and licensing option. So Azure Desktop comes with different flavors and you can purchase this using different license sets. So this is where I help you understand what are the minimum prerequisites you need to have for getting your Azure Virtual Desktop. Then we will finish off with some prerequisites, architectural, top level architecture, and then some of the best practices for Azure Virtual Desktop. And towards the end, we will highlight you about the CloudLabs AI hands-on lab experience, and we have a quick announcement as well. So those who have participating in this webinar can walk away with some lab credits, which you can use it for your demo as well. Cool. So let's kick off with helping understand why virtualization helps address specific business needs. Because virtualization helps companies address various virtualization specific business needs. It provides you with more secure access to your data and your organization. And if you are working in any industry which are required to have any compliance for your vertical, virtualization can give you that. Specific examples are FSIs, healthcare, and government industries. And other scenario where virtualization is going to be helpful is for your elastic workforce. That's where you can think about virtualization, which is going to give you scenarios where, let's assume you have mergers and acquisition going, you have short-term employees or contractors joining your organization. Because of virtualization, you can immediately provide services to these end users or the customers. If you look at from a specific employee's point of view, that is where bring your own device scenarios, or if you have mobile staff or a call center or a branch workers, virtualization can again enable you to quickly provision these desktop environment for these employees to quickly start their work. And towards the end, you can see there are other areas where virtualization is helpful, which is specialized workloads. That is where you have employees using designing and engineering workloads, or they are stuck with some legacy application, but your company have moved on to a modern environment. For them, if they want to use their legacy application, these virtualization can come in and help them work on their old operating system or workloads. So that's where Azure Virtual Desktop can be a great enabler for these end users. So what is Azure Virtual Desktop? Azure Virtual Desktop is a desktop and app virtualization service from Microsoft that runs in Microsoft Azure. What are some of the highlights of Microsoft Azure? You can set up a multi-session Windows 10 deployment that delivers a fully Windows 10 with scalability. So what happens is, in the past, we only used to have a multi-session environment. We need to have a Windows Server environment. With this Azure Virtual Desktop, you can have Windows 10, which can include your Office 365 as well. And you can use that to deliver these virtualized environment to your users. Another cool thing about Azure Virtual Desktop is that it comes with Office 365 optimized environment. So you can get non-Office 365 environment as well. But if you would like to have your Office suite of applications installed on your Windows machines, you can get that image as well. But one difference with that is because it comes on these machines, it is already optimized for your virtualized environment. So Microsoft have made these components ground up to support the virtualization stack. If you do happen to have any existing legacy Windows Server or RDS environments, you can easily migrate that over to Azure Virtual Desktop as well. Because it is all maintained and managed by Microsoft and hosted in the cloud, deploying these services in Azure and scaling it is easy compared to any other legacy supported platforms. Because I mentioned about Windows 10 and Windows 11, you can still go ahead and use Windows Server as well. With Windows Server, you can still leverage your existing application and services on your Azure Virtual Desktop platform. I haven't mentioned it. So if you happen to have any questions at any point in time, please use the chat window. I will be looking at the chat, and we have a couple of people looking into the chat as well, so we can address your questions. If I find any interesting question, I can call out loud, and I can help you understand by taking you through that question. Awesome. Now let's look into some of the key highlights about Azure Virtual Desktop. So one of the key highlight which I want to mention over here is the multi-session for Windows 10. In the past, if you want to give a multi-session environment to any users, we only had one option, which was a server operating system. We either need to have a Windows Server 2012 or 2019, etc. Now with AVD, Microsoft has made it exclusive only for Azure Virtual Desktop, where you can simply spin up a Windows 10 or Windows 11 session host, and you can give that virtual machine to multiple users at the same time. Another cool capability of Azure Virtual Desktop is you can store and you can deploy your apps for just via remote app sharing, or we call remote apps or app streaming. So if you do not want to publish the whole desktop to a user, you have an ability to just publish the application to the user as well. So don't worry about these concepts which I'm mentioning. I'm just setting up the precedents. So I will take you through the hands-on labs and show you how these looks like in the real world as well. In the meantime, if any of your customer or you are stuck with Windows 7 operating system for whatever reason, it could be because you are in the transition to Windows 10 or Windows 11, or it could be because some of the application only work on Windows 7. In that scenario, Microsoft giving a free Windows 7 extended security updates if you move that workload to Microsoft Azure, and you can use Windows 7 as one of the option in Azure Virtual Desktop to deliver these services to your clients or customers. Remote app streaming is one of the popular and newest addition to your Azure Virtual Desktop environment. So what happens is when you create this environment for your customer, you have a couple of options. You can deploy these applications to your internal users, which can be your employees or contractors, or there is a new addition within Azure Virtual Desktop right now is you can deploy these applications to external users, which can be totally non-employees. So you can think of a scenario where you are an ISV and you want to provide these services to your customers, just the app, like a SaaS-based service. You can power it by in the backend using Azure Virtual Desktop. This is totally new. I think you should check this out. Cool. Now let's look at some of the benefits of Azure Virtual Desktop. So the key capabilities of Azure Virtual Desktop include you can create a full desktop virtualization environment in your Azure subscription without running any gateway servers, and you can publish as many host pools as you need to accommodate your diverse workloads. One of the other cool benefit of Azure Virtual Desktop is it supports Windows 7 or Windows Server operating system from 2012 R2 and above. And like I mentioned, Windows 7 is still supported, so it can provide support for your legacy applications as well. Because this is hosted and provided from Microsoft Azure, you can integrate this with multiple other services to manage and provide extra security. So management can be done using either Configuration Manager, which was known as SCCM, or you could use Microsoft Intune, which is now known as Microsoft Endpoint Manager, to connect to these session desktop and your environment to provide that extra management layer. So you can deploy your application, you can update your patches, and you can put additional security controls using these management layer. Let's look at some of the high-level benefits of remote app streaming with this Azure Virtual Desktop. First of all, you can migrate your existing Windows application to Azure. This is where you gain cloud scale security and agility while giving users access from any device from virtually anywhere. Another benefit is you can grow your business by enabling all types of application to, I'm sorry. You can grow your business by enabling all type of applications to run consistently well across the breadth of Windows and other devices with minimal rewrite and hardware requirement. With remote app, you can enable new business models such as time-based subscription or demos. This is what I talked about. Imagine you are an ISV and you just want to provide a service for a particular time, and you can totally leverage Azure Virtual Desktop to provide that service to your customer. Then you can expand into new regions to reach customers globally with minimal effort. Because in the past, if you want to deploy terminal service environment or RDS environment, you have to pretty much do a lot of complicated deployments all by yourself, like making sure that you are deploying the right gateways, you have the connection broker, you need to make sure that all of this talk together, then you need to install the licensing server before setting up your session host. With Azure Desktop, the whole deployment itself is super simple and easy. You can pretty much stand up your environment within 30 minutes. So don't worry about it. I will help you understand how you can start your deployment from a green field and finish the deployment in like 10-15 minutes. Then reduce support and validation or cost becomes this platform agnostic, because uh, across the different customer and different use cases, you can tweak this Azure Virtual Desktop deployment in various ways so that you can customize your environment in based on your requirement. And it reduces the complexity to run a traditional SaaS infrastructure by abstracting gateways, broker, and other resources typically found in a remote desktop service and remote application deployment. I touched based on traditional RDS and VDI, and let me quickly show you how on a high level it is going to look like. If you look at the traditional VDI and RDI environment, you are the one who is responsible for from the hosting of these services to providing these virtualized environment to your end customer. This include various components. You need to make sure that you are setting up the right server and make sure that you have the right storage configured. Once you have the networking, then you manage the environment itself. Maintenance and management include making sure that you have the right licensing, you're patching the right devices. If at all you have multiple session hosts, you need to make sure that your image is consistent. Make sure that all the remote desktop environment is brokered through the right way, and provide entitlement for these users. So it involved a lot of components, and it was complicated and tricky, but still people were using it because virtualization solved many of the problems. With Azure Virtual Desktop, you get a modern environment where most of the services are platform-based services or platform as a service, which is managed by Microsoft. So you don't have any headache of managing any of these underlying infrastructure or architecture in the past what you were managing. All you have to manage or take care of is your session host, which is basically selecting the right image. This could be a Windows 10, Windows 11, or Windows Server, or Windows 7. That's all you have to do. Select the right image and make sure that you install the application what you want to deliver to your customer, and assign it to users. These users could be your internal users or could be an external user as well. So that's all you have to do as a partner. So Microsoft have made this so easier. So now we can think of so many new possibilities where we can go ahead and deploy this Azure Virtual Desktop. So before Azure Virtual Desktop, you were only stuck with the Windows Server operating system. If you want to have multiple users, you need to use Office 2019, which was a perpetual license. There was nowhere you could integrate the CSP, and the problem was so many. Now we have a native single session which gives you modern Windows experience with multi-session environment where you can have Microsoft 365 based services. So it is always up to date. You can include CSP, you can mix and match your services, things like that. Cool. So one of the thing what we are going to see today is I'm going to give you a demonstration on Windows 10 Enterprise session. So we will deploy an environment where we will have one session host based on a Windows 10, and we will make sure we will include these Office 365 services so end users can use it. Additional optimization on Windows 10 include things like Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft have customized the experience of Microsoft Teams on an Azure Virtual Desktop. This include peer-to-peer optimization as well. So your audio and video are redirected. So you can use your native local device for redirection, and the optimization for Microsoft Team is so good on this environment, so you won't feel like it is coming from a virtualized environment. OneDrive is also optimized. You can do co-authoring and collaboration capabilities with this Azure Virtual Desktop, and this is powered by OneDrive. OneDrive Sync will run in a non-persistent environment, so you can use it in Azure Virtual Desktop just like how you use it in your local PCs. The files on demand capability is still available with the OneDrive, and you can auto-populate user profile, folders, etc. If you look at Outlook, you can synchronize your inbox prior and to your calendar for faster startup experience. And your admin have an option to reduce your calendar sync window as well. If you look at auto scaling, scheduling your VMs to start and stop is based on business hours to reduce the cost and complexity. So you can decide when you want to start these VMs, when you want to stop it. You can automate these services, and there are a couple of modes within Azure Virtual Desktop, like brain mode or breadth mode will give you more control on how you can deploy these session hosts within Azure Virtual Desktop. Service tag and URL security. This will help you meet your firewall connection requirement with defined service tags. And this provides you support with Linux thin client SDKs. So that if you have non-Windows devices with thin client SDK, you can use these Linux-based devices and it support all the processes. All right, so let's look at the prerequisites and then I will jump right into the demo so you can actually go ahead and see it. Let me quickly go and see if there are any questions I need to address so we can address that before moving forward. Cool. Did the call already start? I do not have any information. All right, so the call is started. If you can't see it, please restart your session. I'm glad to be part of this session from Nigeria. Yep, thank you for joining the call. Another question is, as per my knowledge, Windows 7 extended version is also supported in Azure Virtual Desktop. You are correct. Windows 7 extended version is also supported at the moment. Please, I would like to know if the session is being recorded, and if yes, how can we access the session? Yes, the session is recorded, and we will give you the recording after you join. Please provide us with your email address. Another question is Azure Virtual Desktop a platform as a service? Azure Virtual Desktop by default is not a platform as a service, but it is a mix of platform and IaaS service. So all the backend service for Azure Virtual Desktop is platform as a service, like your connection broker, your licensing server, your gateway, and all of these are PaaS. Microsoft make sure that it is taken care for you. You are not managing anything, but the session host is the only infrastructure part you need to take care. So you deploy your session host and then you work on it. Cool. I hope that answered the question. All right, so I'm gonna move forward now. Now let's look at the prerequisites and architecture before we look into the demo part. All right, so the first step we need is an Azure subscription. Why do you need an Azure subscription? Because the whole solution is run on Azure. So that is one of the most important prerequisite. Azure subscription will help you deploy the virtual machine. You can create the network resources needed for Azure Virtual Desktop here. And all the items you typically need to spin up a virtual machine. If you are trying this for the first time and you don't have any Azure subscription, I would encourage you to create a free Azure account and you can basically create the Azure Virtual Desktop environment without any issues in no time. I will help you understand how you can create those. Second is you need to have an Active Directory, or I mean Azure Active Directory. So if you are using Office 365 in any shape or form, or Microsoft Intune or other Microsoft cloud service, that means you are already have access to Azure Active Directory. If not, there are tons of documentation that describe how to set up your Azure Active Directory, so don't worry about it. And the part of Azure Active Directory is so minimal that you only need Azure Active Directory to support the deployment of these session hosts, because the session host has to join this Azure AD and your users are residing in your Azure AD. So you need to select the user and assign the right licenses so that they can use it as well. The third is you need to determine your identity strategy. This is where you have to decide, do you want to use an on-premises domain controller or Active Directory, or do you want to use an Azure Active Directory domain services, or do you want to go exclusively with Azure Active Directory? So don't worry, I will help you understand why these things are required. If at all you need it, it's not that it is mandatory. You can very well start your Azure Virtual Desktop deployment without having AD or ADDS, etc. You can just simply start with your Azure Active Directory. But if you have an on-premises environment and they already are using Active Directory, you can leverage those. You can have a site-to-site connectivity and you can leverage those as well. Another prerequisite is you need to decide what image. Image could be your Windows Server or Windows 10 or Windows 11. And another option within that image is you can decide, do you want an image with Microsoft 365 installed, or do you want the image without any of these software? You basically get a vanilla or a plain Windows 10 or a Windows 11 as well. Excuse me. Another thing is you can set up your virtual network in advance so that when you spin up your session host, all the prerequisite for the session host is already set up. You don't have to create storage account unless you want to use Azure Files or NetApp file share for your user profile disk. And the last but not the least is you need to have the right credentials, like logging into your Azure. You need to have the right access to your Azure subscription so that you can create all of these resources. All right. And once you set up the environment, I will let you understand how the connection is going to work. The first one is the agent within the virtual machine interact with the Azure Virtual Desktop managed services, and that it's active. The second is The user launches the remote desktop client, which connects to your Azure AD, and the user signs in and the Azure AD returns the token. The third step is where the remote desktop client presents the token to web access. This is where the broker queries and the DBs to determine the resources are authorized for the user or not. And then the user select the resource. So the remote desktop client connect to your gateway and the sorry. And the last step is the broker orchestrate the connection from the host client and the agent. So you don't have to worry about any of this. It's all the backend process. I'm not showing this to scare you. It's not super complicated. From your point of view or the end user point of view, all they are using is using any of these clients. They can use their mobile phones or tablets or their laptop. They either use an app or they go to a web browser. And when they try to connect to Azure Virtual Desktop, they get the virtual desktop environment. That's how simple it is. All right, so now let's go to the deployment option. So before I show the deployment option, I'm gonna go to my Azure Virtual Desktop environment, or I'm gonna basically log into the Azure portal and show you how it is being done. Cool. All right, so before we see the demo, I'm gonna address a couple more questions which I got in the chat window. Question from Ali is, I use my free trial Azure Virtual, which is expired. Can we get one more time free Azure trial? All right, so Ali, if you already exhausted the credit what you got from free Azure subscription, you need to create one more using a different credit card. That's the problem, or different email address. If you stay towards the end, we have an ability to give you credit as well, but you have to stay towards the end to see how you can participate in that. Um, yes. Another question is, where can you share? When can you share on YouTube? Will you make these slides available? Yep, Santoshi already answered that. Anybody who is participating this event will get an email with all the details. What is reverse connect here? Yeah. So let me go back to the presentation. So the remote connect is the technology what Microsoft uses to make sure that the Azure Virtual Desktop is a secure environment or a secure platform. So what happens is what used to happen is with remote desktop or RDS, when you deploy your environment, you need to open multiple ports like RDP port for users to connect to the environment, which actually, if you don't secure it really well, it actually create the problem of malicious users trying to look into the open port and trying to connect to your environment because the RDP port is open. With Azure Virtual Desktop, there is no requirement of opening any port. It uses a technology called reverse connect. So without even exposing your environment from Azure, you can use the app to connect. So the app is something which looks like this. So let me show you. So this is how an app looks like. You can click on the workspace and try to connect to your environment, and basically this automatically connects to your environment. And from an Azure point of view, when you deploy your Azure Virtual Desktop environment, you don't have to open any port to make it happen. So that is remote connect. Cool. All right. So now we have completed the introduction of Azure Virtual Desktop. I'm going to quickly show you how you can set up or build an Azure Virtual Desktop environment from scratch. First, let's go ahead and create a new resource group. Okay, I'm going to create a new resource group. I'm going to call it as ABD RG Spectra. And where do you want to host the resources? You can pick the closest region possible for you. I'm going to pick Australia East. And if you want to allocate a tag so that you know that all the resources attached to this is going to be for that, you can click on review and create and click on create. All right, so my resource group is created, and right now there is nothing in it. It's an empty resource group. Resource group is important because that's where you're gonna put all the resources. So you can categorize your project workloads or your customer workloads into different resource group. That's how you can segment it or isolate it. I'm gonna go back to resource group one more time because one of the prerequisite, which it's not a prerequisite, actually, it's good to have a virtual network created upfront before you start deploying your Azure Virtual Desktop host information. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go to the same resource group, the one which I just created. Let me quickly delete this so there won't be any confusion. I have another resource group named ABD. So I want to delete it so that while we do the exercises, there won't be any confusion. Cool. I'm going to go back to the resource group, one which we created. I'm going to create the first resource. The first resource is going to be the virtual network. Select the virtual network, click on create. This is the basic virtual network which you can deploy from Azure Marketplace. This is not a third-party virtual network. So select the subscription, select the resource group. I'm selecting the one which we created for today's demo, and I'm going to name it as ABD VNet. Oh, sorry, VNet. So I know that this is a VNet. And the region I'm going to pick again Australia East because that is closer to me, and go to IP addresses. We are not going to change anything. So if we have an option, if we want to add multiple subnets, because if you want to have a different tier within your network, like one for your session host, one for your domain controller, you can define all of that within this. So I'm not going to do anything. Go to the next tab, which is security. If you want to enable Bastion host, this will give you an ability to remotely connect into your RDP environment. If you want to enable that, you can turn on, and other options like firewall, we are going to leave it at default. And go to the tag. I'm going to name it as it's an ABD environment, so I can find out how much it is going to cost me later. I'm going to call it for Spectra environment. Cool, and click on review and create. And deploying an Azure Virtual Desktop, Azure Virtual Network is not going to take much time. It is hardly going to take a minute because it is simply spinning up a software-defined networking component with just a subnet, which is going to support our deployment. Cool. So now we have the resource group ready for our ABD deployment. I only have one resource. Let me quickly refresh it. Oops. Where is it? Is it still deploying? Yeah. So now if you look at the resource group, we have the VNet deployed already, and the VNet is deployed in Australia East as well. That is where I want. Cool. So now we have all of it ready. So the next step is you can basically start the session host without the GUI as well. In the past, we had to create everything one by one and need to attach all of these services. Now Microsoft have made it all the process super simple and easy. They created a new control plane or a management layer for Azure Virtual Desktop. It is called as Azure Virtual Desktop. You can simply go to the global search box and type in Azure Virtual Desktop and find this and select that. And the first step itself is super simple because it gives you a good interface for you to start from scratch. So you can create your host pool here. If you want any additional assistance, like you want to learn how to do it on your own, just click on this link. It takes you to the documentation page explaining how to start your virtual desktop, how to prepare your local image, things like that. All of the quick level documentation is here. And if you want to know about how much it is going to cost, it is takes you to the pricing calculator as well. So towards the end, if you are interested, I can help you understand how you can price up Azure Virtual Desktop environment as well. I can show you what are the components you need to pick and choose within the pricing calculator. Cool. Then on the left hand side, you have some information on how you can get started, how you can manage your host pool. Right now, if you notice, we don't have any resources. It's totally blank, but I'm showing you the option. Then we have application group. This is where you can put details like how many applications you have, how many different groups you have, different workspaces. If you want to have different scaling plans, which you can manage your multiple session host, you can mention that here. And this is where you can quickly search for users as well. Users means all the users which you provide access to these services. Cool. So I'm going to go back to the overview tab and I'm going to click on create a host pool. So this is where we are going to create our first host pool. Host pool can include one or multiple session host, and host pool can include details like where it is hosted and things like that. The first step is select the subscription. You can create a new resource group or select an existing one we created for that. This is what we created. And I'm going to give the pool name. So I'm going to call it as ABD host pool. So it is easy for me to understand. The next one is where is the metadata is going to reside. So metadata information is not available in all Azure regions. These are the only limited Azure region available. Again, don't worry about it. This is not your environment data. It's only the metadata for all of these services is stored. So I'm going to pick East US. My virtual machine and networking and all the component is going to be closer to where and I can choose, but only the metadata option is available on these regions. This is where you have an option to, do you want to enable validate environment? So validation is where a host pool allows you to test the service changes before they are deployed to the production. So do you want to enable or not? I'm going to enable it. So it tests and tells me if it is available or not. The next option is host pool type. This is quite important to understand. So I'm going to quickly increase the size so you can see it. So host pool, there are two types. One is pooled, another one is personal. If you select personal, that means you are giving an experience for a full VDI environment. It is 1-to-1 ratio. So if you have a requirement from your customer and they want to run CAD services or a video rendering service where they want a dedicated virtual machine for themselves, you would ideally assign one-on-one virtual machine to these users. So they get all the resources allocated on that virtual machine. They can basically go and do modification on the virtual machine, things like that. It's one-on-one mapping. The second one is pooled. Pooled is where you have an ability to give that same virtual desktop to multiple users. So this is where you will go and select the image, Windows Server or Windows 10, and then you deploy it to these users, and multiple users can sign into the same virtual machine or a same session desktop at once. Why is this important? Because this can give you cost savings, because you are basically going to leverage all the resources what you have on a virtual machine for multiple users. Second, you can have tight control around one session host, and you can provide these services to multiple users at the same time. Within that, there are a couple of options. When you select pooled, you can decide whether you want to go with breadth first or depth first. Breadth first means, let's assume you have 3 session hosts. If you select breadth first, the first user go into the first session host. Second user, when they log in, they go to the second session host, and the third goes to the third session host. And because you only have 3 session hosts, the fourth user comes back to the first session host because it is filling the breadth. This is ideal for giving a consistent performance, or a good performance for multiple users, and you have enough capacity. And if more users are trying to log in, they won't feel any lag because all of your virtual machines are ready to serve their need. That is where it is good at. But the problem with breadth first is you need to have these session hosts pre-configured and ready to go. Even if users are not allocated to these virtual machines, sometimes you need to run these session hosts in parallel. The another option is depth first. So in this scenario, you can very well go with multiple session hosts, but what happens is, imagine you go with a maximum session limit of 5, and you have 2 session hosts. Before allocating all the users to the session host, it will make sure that it will go and allocate all the users based on the maximum capacity on one session host. Once it reaches the limit of that session host, it moves on to the second one. I hope I didn't complicate the concept for you. If you do happen to have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat window. So that's how you select breadth first or depth first. So I'm going to select pooled here. So we're going to select a pooled session. And I'm going to select depth first because I'm going to only have one session host, because for sake of this demo. And the maximum user limit, I'm going to put it as 1. Sorry, I'm going to put it 3 users. So let's assume if I want to have multiple users, you can connect it. Click next. So this is where you have an option to put your virtual machine details. So I'm going to select add a virtual machine. So you can very well continue this whole setup without adding a virtual machine as well. So I'm going to click add a new virtual machine. Our resource group is automatically created. So there it is asking for a prefix for your virtual machine. So I'm going to call it as AVD session host 00. So my first session host is going to be known as AVD session host 00, and the subsequent or the newer session host, when I add, it is going to be added as 1, 2, or 3 towards the end. Cool. This is where it is asking, where do you want your session host to be? So I want it as close to me, or I want it as close to where my users are going to use it. So the ideal scenario is you can be wherever you want, but you would pick the virtual machine location to the closer to where the user is actually going to use it. If you are in Canada, you would ideally, if your customer base is in Canada or Europe, you would ideally pick the region closest to you. So they will not get any latency issues or things like that. So I'm going to pick Australia East. Oh, I forgot to mention something else. There is something called Azure Virtual Desktop um, Desktop Experience Estimator. So let me quickly show you that. So if you are trying to deploy Azure Desktop for the first time and you want to figure out, okay, what is going to be the experience for Azure Virtual Desktop and which region to pick, please use this Azure Virtual Desktop Experience Estimator. This will give you the round trip milliseconds based on the region where you are from. So for me, it is showing it's either Southeast or Australia East. So that's why I'm picking East. So I could very well go with Southeast actually, because it is even lesser turnaround time. So for me as a user, it is not advisable to host my services in South Africa, West or something like that, because the turnaround time is like huge. So you can very well test this before selecting the region. Cool. So I'm going to move that away. Cool. So I'm going to pick Australia East. And availability options, you have multiple options. If you want your services to be highly available, this is where you would choose availability zone or availability set. Zone will give you enter data center failure level within your data center. So for demo, I'm not going to pick any availability option. I'm going to pick no infrastructure needed. Service type, you have multiple options. One is standard. This is totally new. Microsoft have added. There is a new trusted launch virtual machine. This actually help you protect against any sort of persistent and advanced attack on Gen 2 virtual machines. So I'm going to select standard and image. So this is quite important. So you need to understand how you're going to provide the image for your Azure Virtual Desktop. First option is gallery. So when you select gallery, Microsoft will show you all the pre-defined gallery images Microsoft provide for you. You can basically pick and choose from the list of options here, or you can bring your own image. So you can create your own custom image, upload it to your store blob storage, or you can use Microsoft shared image gallery as well. Create your own image, standardize it, um, specialize the image, and then upload it. Then just provide the URI where you hosted this image and you can use that. This is quite important and good. Let's assume you have a customer where they have a requirement of using a standardized image and they have some custom application they want to be installed all the time and things like that. So what you can do is, rather than modifying all the image manually one by one, you create that standardized image, you customize it, and then what you do, you upload that image. So every time when you want to use a session desktop, you pick that image which you chose or you created rather. I'm going to pick gallery, and within gallery, as you can see, there are plenty of options. So I have different Windows 10. There is Windows 2019. There are even Windows 11 operating system. But if you want any other image, you can click on see all images. This is where you can come and search for different operating system, including Windows 7. So I'm going to go back to create pool. Let's go back to image. Within the image, there are a couple of things you need to understand. One, definitely Gen 1 and Gen 2, you have read in the past, there is a different security type. So Gen 2 will give you extra protection. Then another option is, as you notice, there are some images with just image with Windows 10 multi-session. So if you select this, you only have Windows 10 operating system. You can install your custom application and so on and so forth. But I want my Microsoft 365 apps pre-installed because these Microsoft 365 apps are optimized for Azure Virtual Desktop. So I don't want to install something on my own because that may not be optimized. This comes with all set of tools, productivity tools needed for the end user pre-install, like the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, your Access, your Teams, things like that. All of it is pre-configured and installed. So I would like to select that. And I have two options. I can either select Windows 10 or I can go and select Windows 11 as well. So I'm going to pick a 2004 version of Windows 10 with M365 apps installed. The next option is selecting the right virtual machine. The virtual machine sizing, it's a thing on itself. So first of all, you can come to this page and select the size which you need. Microsoft have a size guideline for Azure Virtual Desktop, so you can decide what is the appropriate size. I have a slide which talks about the right sizing. So let me see if I can pull up that slide. So we can easily explain that before moving forward. So these are the sizing guidelines recommended by Microsoft. So if you are going to use a multi-session environment, and if your usage is light, Microsoft recommend you can have a maximum user, like if the usage is light, I can have up to 6 users per vCPU. So if I have two virtual CPUs in this one single virtual machine, I can provision this virtual machine for 12 users, because if the usage is light, I can have up to 6 users. If the usage is medium, then I can have up to 4 users per virtual machine. So this particular virtual machine with 4 vCPU, 16 GB RAM, I can have up to 16 users. So you get the point, right? And if you want to find out what do you mean by power user, what do you mean by heavy, medium, and light, there is a documentation which explain what it is. I can probably help you understand by telling you, okay, light user is basically a knowledge worker where they use probably some websites, they try to launch some application and they just use that. Medium users try to use some application along with their website and they probably use it for accounting purposes, things like that. Heavy and power users are which I talked about, where they want a dedicated machine where they want to run for video rendering, or they want to use CAD software or video editing software where they need more resources. So for those users, Microsoft recommend one user need at least 6 vCPUs or 4 vCPUs, because you know that all the resources it is going for that one single user. So that's the virtual machine sizing. So we'll come to the presentation later. Let's go back. So you have to anticipate what the usage is going to be and how many users is going to connect to the virtual machine. And then you come to the gallery of images. And each of these families are catered for different purposes. So what you need to have an understanding about which series you need to pick. One thing which I want to highlight is if you have any graphical uh, usage like GPU requirement, then you need to go with N series. So I don't even see N series in my free subscription. Otherwise, you can very well pick an image from your D series. So which is, I mean, like D series is quite good because it's a general purpose compute which can provide you with the required compute for your selection. So I'm going to go back to Azure Virtual Desktop. Oops. So we selected pooled breadth first. I want to add for 3 users. Virtual machine, yes. ABD VM00 is what we have given. The virtual machine location is Australia East. We don't want to provide any availability zone because it's a lab environment. Security, I selected standard. Image I want from gallery because I don't have any custom image which I uploaded. And I'm going to choose a Windows 10 with Microsoft 365 apps. And the image, you can select your own, but I'm going to leave with D2S, which will give me 2 vCPU. And if the usage is light, I can have up to 12 users in one single virtual machine. That is amazing. And the next step is how many virtual machine you need. So if you want 2 or 3 session hosts, this is where you will give that number. In my case, I only need one virtual machine at the moment. The disk on the operating system, you have option. Do you want to go with premium SSD or a standard SSD? Standard will give you magnetic drive, and SSD, you know that it's a high performance stateless drive. So I'm going to choose standard SSD. Do you want to enable boot diagnostic? Enabling is recommended, so I'm going to leave it at default. After you select that, then we come to the networking. So remember, we selected or created a virtual network. That this is why I created the virtual network in advance. Otherwise, at this point, I will not have anything to select. So I'm going to select the VNet we created. I have a default subnet, which is enough. Then if you want to have extra security, you can select a network security group. None will not have any security around your environment. Basic will give you basic protection. Advanced will like block out any traffic in and out. Then you have to go into your NSGs to enable traffic to come in and out of your environment. So I'm going to choose basic. Uh, you don't necessarily need to enable any public inbound ports because that is not at all a requirement for Azure Virtual Desktop because it uses reverse connect. So without having any public inbound port, you can very well access your RDS or Azure Virtual Desktop environment. If you do want to enable it, you can enable yes and select what port you want to turn on. If you want RDP, you can turn on RDP. So I'm going to select no. You may have a question like how are you going to connect to the session host? So you can either use Azure Bastion or you can have a jump box server set up in your environment and you can use that to connect your session host to install your custom applications, etc. The next option is whether you want to use Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. If you choose Active Directory, you need to make sure that your Active Directory is recognized within this virtual network, or you need to have the right VNet peering so that your session host is going to host in this VNet can connect to your Active Directory. And you need to provide a domain join username and password so that your session host can be joined to your Active Directory. I'm going to choose Azure Active Directory because I don't have it and I want to save the cost and it is easier to enroll. While doing that, if you want to enroll your virtual machine to your Microsoft Intune, you can do that. So I'm going to select no. If you choose yes, you need to have the right Microsoft Intune licenses. And more importantly, you need to have the enrollment for Windows servers configured properly. So if you don't have this, deployment is going to fail. So I'm going to select no. And what is going to be the local account on the virtual machine so that you can log into the machine as well. So I'm going to create a local account called local admin. And I'm going to give a password. Cool. And post the deployment, if you want to have any sort of desired state configuration or custom script you want to execute to automate a lot of tasks, you can put that URL here. This is so handy because imagine you want to do a lot of hardening on your operating system. You want to change the security settings, and these are all like a lot of manual steps. So you can create a script and put that script over here. So every time when you spin a new session host, all of that security check or changing your wallpaper, changing your registry setting, changing your custom security options can be automated by just giving that URL. So I don't have any option at the moment, so I'm going to click on workspace. So workspace is how you define these user settings and application group on your host pool. So by default, there won't be any. So I'm going to create a new workspace. I'm going to create a name called Spectra AVD workspace. So I'm going to call it a Spectra AVD workspace and go to the next tab, advanced settings. If you want to enable boot diagnostic, you can enable it. If you enable it, there are some prerequisites. You need to at least have a log analytics workspace where you need to point it to, um, or you need to have a storage account or an event hub configured. So if you have all of this, um, you can enable the diagnostic. I don't want to do that. And the tag, I'm going to give it to AVD, and I'm going to put all the values to Spectra. So towards the end, I can easily find out which one it is. And once you complete this, you can click on review and create. The validation is the most important part. So all the values, whatever we select, if any of the values is not matching with the environment, then this is going to fail. So we have selected the virtual machine. We have selected it is pooled. Number of virtual machine is one, default security group, and we are joining the machine to Azure Active Directory and click on create. This is ideally is going to take 30 to 40 minutes. That's how simple it is. If you have seen, like, because I was explaining it, I took like 10 or 15 minutes explaining it. But if you're not explaining it, if you're just using any if you're just using to deploy it for yourself, it is so fast, like 5 to 10 minutes, you can have your environment up and ready. So while that is happening, I want to see if there is any question I want to address from the chat window. Cool. There were so many questions. Thank you so much for answering. I think Aditya was one who are answering. Thank you so much, Aditya, for taking care of this question. So let me see if there are any questions. What is a jump box server? So jump box servers are something which you create in an environment in a DMZ zone to or in an environment which you secure to connect to your Azure virtual machine. So let's assume you have multiple Azure virtual machine in your environment, but you are not opening any inbound port. It is not exposed to internet, but you want to log into this virtual machine for maintenance purpose. So you create a jump box server and you tightly control the security around it and you connect to that. And within that virtual machine, you can access all the virtual machine within your Azure environment. Another mechanism to connect to the virtual machines in your environment is to have a Azure Bastion configured so you can securely connect to your environment. So I hope that answered the question. Another question is, what is the purpose of the workspace? Without workspace, we can deploy the AVD host pool. Yes, Aditya is answering it. Yes, you can, but workspace is needed for configuring your application group and user connectivity. What is the use case of a jump server? Any example? I just answered that question. I hope that was clear. If you need further clarification, please let me know. Cool. The deployment is happening. So I want to highlight a couple of other important aspects which I tend to miss is Azure Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory uh, uh, is important, is needed. This is where all of your users are residing. So you need to make sure that your users have the right license. So pick a user. Let's assume I want to assign the access to Adele. Make sure that Adele have the right licenses. You can check that by going on the left hand side, click on license tab and click on assignments. And the user need to have at least Microsoft 365 Business Premium license to use Azure Virtual Desktop. So please do make sure that you assign the right minimum level license to the user so that they can connect to the Azure Virtual Desktop environment. That is a very important step. The second most important detail is you need to come to Azure Virtual Desktop, sorry, Azure Active Directory, and scroll down to devices. And under devices, select device settings. And you need to turn this on. User may use join device to Azure AD. If this is none or it is not selected, the session desktop will not be able to join to your Azure Active Directory. So the deployment will fail. So prior to your deployment, you need to make sure that your users may join to Azure AD is selected to all and selected as yes. Cool. These are a couple of important steps you need to be aware of. So while the deployment is happening, so I'm going to go back to my presentation and we are gonna complete the presentation and we're gonna come back and see the real actual user experience on how it is going to look like and how you can configure your workspace, things like that. So I'm going to definitely come back to the lab later. Let's go back to the presentation. Cool. All right. Let's see if there are any questions. Nope, all of it is addressed by Aditya. Thank you so much, man. You're super helpful. Awesome. So let's talk about the storage options. If you are on-prem and you have a classical VDI environment, you can use a typical file share that include virtual machines with data disk. This is where you have your storage. And when you move into the cloud and you want to ensure that you have the same resiliency and redundancy that you would have with your standard file share. With virtual machines with FS Logics profile, FS Logics act as your file share, and this can be used for your data disk. And with Azure, these disks are resilient and will have the same SLA that Azure provides for other resources. So the VMs with FS Logics profile and Azure files know how to leverage your FS logics to make sure the solutions are even easier and integrate into all the services Azure has to offer. So Azure files no longer need virtual machines with disk in order to have the file share. Instead, it uses to connect to Azure files, which is managed by the Azure. It's a platform as a service and have all the profile data contained there. So if I am planning to use Azure Virtual Desktop, I would highly encourage you to look into Azure File Share as the preferred storage location for your user profile disk. Because one, it is highly available, highly resilient. Second, it is cost effective and easy to manage. And it is a cloud native service. So I will try to leverage all cloud native services first before moving into any other traditional legacy services. Cool. Just a quick high level knowledge on FS Logics profile. You can very well use FS Logics with Azure Virtual Desktop and it is totally free for you. In the past, you had to buy FS Logics as a third-party service. Now Microsoft acquired the service and totally integrated that service into Azure Virtual Desktop. It is totally free for you. This is where the profile is stored in VHD or VHDX format. This is the same approach which you can use for your user profile disk. When you use FS Logics, it is mounted at login using your block transfer. And this provide a faster login and there is no need for any target storage requirement. And this more performant and more resilient than any other service. The size of the profile doesn't impact the logon time because it is going to be mounted on your session virtual desktop while you're logging in. It is not actually stored on your local device. It uses the VHDX format, which is good because it's a block transfer, decreases network utilization. And for caching, it uses caching from the Windows Cache Manager. The profile container redirects everything from the user profile. So you are not storing anything on your local machine. And it filter the driver causes profile to appear local. So any sort of broader application support or system always thinks that it is internal, which is key for application that want local system drives to do their work. So FS Logics is a way to go, and it is totally free, and it is included with your Azure Virtual Desktop. Cool. Now let's look at the deployment option. So I have a demo which here quickly showing you how the Azure Virtual Desktop will look like after you deploy it. Don't worry, once our environment is completely provisioned, I will show you how you can configure it and how you can connect to the environment as well. So this is a quick demonstration on how you can connect to your Azure Virtual Desktop. You can either use an application or you can use an HTML5 browser to connect to your Azure Virtual Desktop environment. Once you connect to your environment, it's just like your local PC. You can go to your system and you can see that, okay, it is not actually a local PC. It is a Windows 10 Enterprise virtual desktop. But when you use it, you don't even feel it's a virtual desktop. It looks and feels just like a real virtual machine. You can launch the application whatever you want, just like how you would use a typical local virtual machine like your laptop or desktop. You can have your custom applications installed, or it comes with predefined pre-installed applications. It supports your Office 365 Pro Plus in a non-persistent environment, so you can launch and close these applications in use the OneDrive or Teams or whatever you have in your virtual machine. You can go to your File Explorer or use OneDrive, which in a non-persistent capacity. And all the features of OneDrive is available, including on-demand file share as well. Cool. That's how it is looks like. That's a quick demo, but don't worry, we will come to the real demo soon. This is a quick highlight to show that how many number of users are using this virtual desktop at the moment and what's the performance like. All right, so we have seen a couple of deployment options here. I have explained you how you can choose the compute, how you can use the user profile and apps. This is another quick information of how you can do. One more information, like FS Logics is the one which compiles the user information in a quickly loadable and mountable file format. It is compatible for your pool-based deployment. So when the users turn off the compute, they can still access the user profile when they sign back in. And this ensures that the customer understand that FS Logics is owned by Microsoft. So the rebranding of the FS Logics is in progress. But in the past, it used to be another company. You had to buy it. Now it is totally free. For application, there is MSIX app is also possible. So MSIX app is an application on-demand feature which helps prevent over processing and speed up your user logins. In the style of FS Logic, the user profiles are stored in a virtual hard disk, which can significantly improve the user experience at logon. We talked about the compute option extensively. You can choose your own virtual machine on any region. You can lift and shift any existing infrastructure to Azure, and it's support for both personal and pooled virtual machine as well. Talking about compute, while you choose the right configuration, you need to understand the scalability options as well. We talked about the personal and pooled. Personal is ideal for single session users. Again, I reiterated multiple times, it is intended for any users who require more gruntier virtual machines because they want to perform heavy duty applications or heavy duty use case scenarios. And choosing the right virtual machine is also very key here. The application type which a heavy performance demand is for any CAD software or SAP application and other batch processing, things like that. That's where you use the heavy performance machines. The pooled virtual machines is ideal for any multi-session users where you can provide a light to medium workload or basic requirements, basic business requirement. And ideal virtual machine family size is B series, B for ball, or D series, D for dog. While provisioning these virtual machines, you can totally use Azure automation to automate your Azure management task. I talked about one automation where you can use is if you have multiple session hosts, you can provision things like automatic scaling or automatically turning off the unused session host. So you are saving the cost for your company or for your customers. The next important task is pay only for your virtual machine. So you can bring concepts like Azure reserved instance. So once you have multiple session hosts and you decide that, okay, you're going to use that virtual machine for 1 or 3 years for your business because you're not going to change it. And to get further reduction or discount on your Azure billing, you can go for Azure reserved instance. That can give you additional, I think 40 to 70% on your existing virtual machine cost if you go for reserved instance with Azure. So we talked about Azure user profile disk with FS logics. You can very well use Azure NetApp files as well. It is a recommended choice for Azure Virtual Desktop. So you're not only stuck with Azure files. Azure NetApp is also easy to deploy and it is managed, but cost a bit more than Azure files because it's a third-party service. And it gets a native type experience without any patching or management. Another option is, of course, it is Azure Files because it is cheaper than Azure NetApp Files, which requires more work to deploy and manage. Azure Files is a native type experience without any patch, gives you native type experience without you doing any patching or management because it's a platform-based service. Another option is you can very well use your file server cluster. This is great for certain customer scenarios where regional availability is key. It is difficult to use if you use any file server cluster and difficult to manage as well because you need to patch it, you have to configure, you have to have certain requirements, things like that. So choose the right service for the right configuration. When you use this application, MSIX app is something which I would definitely encourage you to have a close attention because MSIX app is an application on demand feature which helps you prevent over processing and speeds up your user logins. You can very well connect your application when only the user logs in, and it uses FS logic storage concept in the backend. And when you use MSIX, it provides apps and made available as per the user basis and deliver apps dynamically to session host virtual machines. Why do you use MSIX? Because this actually simplifies the app management and golden image management. So you don't have to configure any target storage requirement. There is no repackaging needed for application in MSIX format. And number of apps used doesn't impact the sign-in time. So sometimes what happens when you pump in lot of application in your golden image or your session host, the sign-in time for the user can take some time, but if you move away from installing all the application on your local machine and go with the MSIX technology, the sign-in time is much faster because there is no load time. And it can reduce the amount of host pool as well. So if you have two apps that are incompatible, then you have to put them in two host pools. In app masking, you can hide it from each other and the users as well. And if your apps can work with MSIX, then it is recommended solution. Otherwise, choose FS Logic's app masking. If you are looking for a third-party solution, which is available. Third-party solutions like LiquidWire can be used for this scenario as well. All right, so now we have seen the prerequisites and we have seen the deployment option. Now let's quickly look into the management option for Azure Virtual Desktop. Regardless of if you use Azure Virtual Desktop as it is, or you can use third-party services like Citrix or VMware to manage your environment as well. The underlying technology will be always Azure Virtual Desktop. So the job of the control plane is to orchestrate the creation and management of desktop and app session host. This gives you an ability to authenticate your users, and this helps you determine where to land a user desktop connection. In the RDS world, this was handled through a number of RDS roles. It used to be known as licensing server, RD web, RD web client, RD connection broker, and RD gateway. It used to be super complicated and cumbersome to manage and deploy all of it. With Azure Virtual Desktop, it is no longer necessary to install and manage any of these roles as they are now part of Azure Virtual Desktop Management Service. Microsoft do the work and deliver you the platform as a service product that can be controlled via REST APIs, PowerShell, and using your Azure admin portal as well. There are some cost savings associated with elimination of these separate VMs for different web apps diagnosis. Because imagine if you have to deploy a connection broker, web client, gateway, you have to spin up multiple virtual machines. That will require a lot of cost overhead to your whole solution. With Azure Virtual Desktop, you're only paying for the right license and your session host. That's about it. Rest everything is taken care by Microsoft. Cool. Um, like I said, you can very well start your Azure Virtual Desktop using the Microsoft control plane, or you can start with enabling and executing this environment using Citrix or VMware. All right, so we talked about the management layer. Now let's talk about the licensing aspect of Azure Virtual Desktop. So before licensing, let me quickly go back to the teams and see if there are any questions. Is it possible to see a demo on how 3x users can use Azure Virtual Machine at the same time on multiple sessions? I wouldn't be able to show that at the moment, but it's technically I will be able to show a user logging in and imagine 3 users logging in on the same session. So it would be like that. So we haven't prepared a demo with multiple user environment. We just assign it to one user. What is lift and shift? Lift and shift is imagine you have an on-premises solution using your RDS environment, and you're lifting and shifting that environment into Azure. So that is referred as lift and shift. From the AVD, will a user be able to connect to client VPN split? Yes, you can very well configure that if you want to have that solution implemented. You need to deploy a VPN client solution to your AVD environment, and then you can connect to that. Cool. And thank you once again, Aditya, for answering all other questions. Thank you so much. Let me go back to my presentation. Cool. All right. So in this scenario, this is where we are going to talk about the client and server licensing requirement. For clients, customers who are eligible to access any Windows 10 machines, multi-session or Windows 7, minimum license requirement is you need to have at least Windows 10 VDA per user or Windows 10 education or Windows 10 Enterprise E3 or E5. If you're looking for a cheaper licensing option, I would highly encourage you to look into Microsoft 365 business licenses, because uh, this gives you not only Azure Virtual Desktop licensing, this gives you ability to use Microsoft Productivity Suite of applications as well, which include Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, which include your Exchange Online, OneDrive, Teams, etc. So please look into that. If you, for some reason, you want to use Windows Server environment on an Azure Virtual Desktop session host, you need to acquire RDS CALs. If you want to use server, the M365 licenses or CSP licenses is not going to work. RDS CALs is the way to go, because that is going to add extra cost to your whole solution. So I would encourage you to try to see if your application work on a Windows 10 or Windows 11 environment, so you can save a lot of money there, and it is much easier to manage as well. Along with that, you will be paying for the virtual machine. So licensing is not the only aspect. You will be paying for the virtual machine, then you will be paying for the storage and the networking. Networking means any data which is going to come out of Azure will be paid. You need to pay as well. To take advantage of cost savings and discounts, you can reserve your virtual machines for 1 or 3 years, which can give up to 70% or 72% versus your pay as you go. There is a new per user access pricing for external users, which started last year, July, which will give you an ability to provide access to remote app for users. So per user app per month is $5 and $10 per user per month for apps and desktops. Cool. So when you try to price up the solution for Azure Virtual Desktop, you need to decide whether is it going to be a per user cost or per solution cost. And you can use Azure pricing calculator to price up the solution. So while you pricing up the Azure infrastructure, please do make sure to put in details like your virtual machine and your operating system cost, your storage for your storage cost for your data disk, user profile storage, which is your FS Logics, Azure files or Azure NetApp files, and networking cost, which is your any data which is going to come out of Azure. So these should be considered. All right, so let me go ahead and look at the environment now to see if it is completed. Yeah, deployment is successful. So let's go to the resource now. Our deployment is completed. I will show you how you can configure first of all. So now we have our Azure Virtual Desktop environment configured. You can go to Azure Virtual Desktop. You don't have to create the host pool. Your host pool is created. So when you click on host pool, you can see this is what we created, AVD host pool, and where it is residing. And you can click on application group. We have one AVD host pool application group created. We created a workspace as well. Workspace is nothing but a logical container which you can use to manage your environment. Within that workspace is where you will go and manage your application group and set up your applications, etc. We are not going to look into the scaling plan now. If you want to create a scaling plan, this is where you would create it. Right now, we are going to go back to host pool and click on the host pool. First thing, what I would encourage you to do is if you want to modify any remote desktop properties, this is where I would encourage you to come and do it. If you want to change the behavior of how when you user try to connect, what it should be doing, the video playback, you can configure and modify the setting here. Device redirection, this is very important for your microphone. Do you want it to be enabled on your local device or your session desktop? Video encoding, your printing, and all of these clipboard actions all can be redirected. Display options, when somebody try to connect it, do you want it to be displayed on multiple displays or on their primary display? How do you want these screen sizing to be configured? What's the desktop size is going to be? What's the height and size? Things like all of this can be configured here. And if you want to run any other um, syntaxes while enabling the RDP, this is where you come and modify that. So that's one of the setting which I would highly encourage you to check. If you want to manage your session host, you can click on manage your session host here. MSIX app packages can be configured here. Click on add and you can add here. And your application groups can be added here. Another configuration is I go to my workspaces, click on workspace, select your application group. And I want to add if you want to add application, this is where you will come and add applications. I want to talk about assignments. So now what we have done is we created the host pool, the workspace and everything, but we haven't assigned it to any user. So if you want to assign it to a user, you click on add. But first and foremost, you need to make sure that you have the right users, have the right license, and pick a user and select assigned. So once you assign it, your users will be able to connect to an Azure Virtual Desktop environment. Cool. So now let's look at the best practices and then we can connect to the environment. So I'm going to go to the best practices. All right. So first is host management, the things you need to remember. So first is admin need to take care of the updation of your host session host. You need to have an understanding about what sort of an image you're going to use. If you're planning to use custom image, try to use Microsoft shared image gallery so it is easier to manage your multiple images. Make sure that you use a deployment tool to take care of the operating system patching and updates. Application updates has to be done continuously as well. Master image best management is use either third-party solution or Azure Update Management to make sure that your image is managed properly. Always use the golden image, which is provided by the Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop, because it gives you the regularly updated image all the time. Use the application masking technologies to minimize the footprint on your image, because the more application you stuff into your golden image, the load time for the user is going to be that high as well. So try to reduce that. And we have provided documentations in this slides. Like if you click on this documentation, it takes you to a page where it will show you how you can prepare your master image, things like that. And some recommendation for your patch management as well. So use one host pool as the pilot for your group for updating for all of your pools. So you make sure that you're not affecting all the pools if in case there is any issues. All VMs must be at the same update level after the maintenance, because otherwise your host pool will have problems serving your clients. Updating VMs with the existing Azure update solution is an ideal solution. Use SCCM to manage your image, because that is going to make your life much more easier. And update can be staged in a maintenance window. So you can select drain mode. So that will prevent any users from logging into your solution while you are doing your maintenance. Network requirement, if you do happen to have on-prem, I would highly encourage you to look into either Express Route, which will give you a dedicated connection to your environment, so you can use your on-prem resources as well, or site-to-site, which is a limited bandwidth compared to an Express Route, or you can use Azure AD domain services as well. Requirement for your AD, if you have an on-prem AD, and VMs must be joined to your on-premises AD if you are not planning to use your Azure Active Directory. We have seen the multi-session recommendation. So look at the sizing recommendations for your personal. If you have a requirement for GPU, please look into N series virtual machine, which has typically high graphical user interface options. And VM sizing for single virtual machines are likely to align to your physical device guidelines as well. Use Microsoft recommended tools to gauge the sizing recommendation as well. Cool. So we have seen the Azure Virtual Desktop hands-on labs. I'm going to show you the output. So thank you so much for tuning in for today's session. So CloudLabs is giving a promotional $3,000 USD Azure credit for qualified customers for deploying your Azure Virtual Desktop. So please go to this link. I will make sure to put that in the chat window so that you can easily access it and register yourself to make sure that you can qualify for this $3,000 US credit. So let me go back to the environment first. So first thing is because I'm using a Mac operating system, I have to install the client. So I'll show you how you can access the Mac operating system client. Let's go to your browser and you need to first of all download this client. There is an app available for Windows as well, and there is an app available for your Linux operating system, and there is an app available for your iPad, Android devices, and your iPhones and Android phones as well. So let's open this. Click on Workspaces. So first step is to add the workspace. So you can add the workspace discoveries, which is rdweb.web microsoft.com. Once you add it, it immediately add the workspace. It then asks you for Azure username and password. So I have pre-provisioned an environment. So I'm gonna log in with that username and the password for that user. And it is going to look for a workspace for that particular user. As you can see over here, for this user, we have published not only a session desktop, we have published remote app as well. So you can have multiple workspaces like this. So you can have one workspace for one user, or one user can have multiple workspaces as well. And within these workspaces, users can have either remote app or session host and have both as well. So to access a desktop, all you have to do is double tap. Because I'm using multiple screens, when I double tap, the remote desktop is going to be visible in all the desktops. So I'm going to edit the connection first. So use custom settings, and I want to use not all monitor. I just want to use one single monitor. Cool. And double tap on your session desktop. put in the password for the user. Click on continue. Cool. So, okay, it is asking me to set up the Windows Hello. So I'm going to quickly verify the settings before we proceed with the.
Thank you for using sign-in verification system. Please press the pound key to finish your verification. Your sign-in was successfully verified. Goodbye.
All right, that's okay. All right, so now you can see that I logged into a session host. It is as it is like it's my local machine. As you have seen, I was using a Mac operating system, but now I have access to a Windows operating system. I can launch Teams. I can have a Teams call there. I can go to a browser. I can even launch Outlook, and the performance of the machine is as good as my local machine. I don't feel like I am using a virtual machine. So this is the experience for a user. So I'm going to minimize it so that you know that that's a virtual machine and that's a Windows 10 environment. And my local machine is a Mac operating system. So that's one experience. Another experience is if I want to launch any of these applications, all I have to do is double tap, and that is going to launch the remote app. So you can have a user only accessing remote app, or you can have a user accessing both at the same time. So let's provide the password for the user. And the performance, what you're seeing over here, any sort of lag is only going to be visible for the first time because it is setting up the stuff for the user. Otherwise, you will not see any performance delay. Oh, it actually opened in another window. So this is the remote app performance. I'm on my Mac. It actually installed, not installed, it's actually showing me a way to use Excel on my Mac without even me installing it on my local PC. So that's how a remote app works. So I can resize it, I can choose it, and I can work just like a regular app. Or I can go to my desktop, expand it, and I can work on my desktop as well. So let me see if there are any questions. Site was not opening, showing like invalid response. Yep. So let me see if the site works or not. If not, don't worry. We will send you the information on how you can accept. Yeah, Tarun have already responded to how you can access this event. That's awesome. So thank you so much. I hope the information provided in this course is helpful, and I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of questions. We didn't had any problem with the demo or anything. It all went really, really well. And I'm going to be in the call for another 7 more minutes. So if you do happen to have any questions, please feel free to put that question in the chat window. I'm happy to take those questions. And definitely try out this Azure Virtual Desktop. This is an amazing technology, and it can resolve a lot of uh, solution. It can resolve a lot of problems with the customer side, or it can create new opportunities for you as well as a partner. So I'm going to put the slide back on the screen so you have something to look while we are closing it off. Awesome. And Tarun, Aditya, or Santoshi, do you want to add anything?
No, I think like we're good. Probably, yeah. If anyone have any questions, probably they can ask, I think, yeah.
Thank you for your feedback. So there is one question in the chat window. I was wondering if you happen to have any resources around using ephemeral disk. I don't have any resources in handy, but I would encourage you to probably look at Azure Files or Azure NetApp for these. Can we have, can we set a carrier on Azure for long run? What do you mean carrier? I don't understand. We know that question. For long run, what do you mean by that? Oh, you mean like, do you want to set a budget or something? So what I would encourage is if you prefer to have any cap on long running Azure Virtual Desktop environment, try to use the algorithm either breadth first or depth first. Which can give you some fine tuning options, or use Azure automation to automate on the way how Azure Virtual Desktop runs. Hey Tarun, do we still have attendees on the call, or are
I
they
think
all
we can
signed
wait
off?
for 2 more minutes and then we can end the call. Shishma. Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome.